My approach is to go with Islam next, just because the three great monotheistic religions are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Everything else kind of is different, and they share a lot. I actually have a picture and a Venn diagram for those who like those in a few minutes. But Islam is an Arabic word. Literally means submission to the will of Allah or God. Allah is the Arabic word for God. So if that's the basic thing. Now you might notice, let's see if we can have a little fun. The root letters are S, L, and M. There's a Hebrew word that has the root letters S, L, and M as well. Actually, S, H, L, and M. Any thoughts?
Shalom.
Shalom. It's related to that word. Arabic and Hebrew are, isn't so. That root can be translated peace. But I would guess if I were to ask most people, Islam means peace, people would say, nah, because of obviously things that have happened to us, like 9/11. So it can mean that. And an adherent to Islam is a Muslim, and Muslim is a word that means, I wrote it down and put it up there, one who submits. So Islam as a faith is all about submission to the will of Allah, and to be a Muslim is one who submits. So you can tell this is a pretty important idea, this idea of submission or obedience in Islam. Here's my Venn diagram, just for fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
It's terrible. This is not the Venn diagram I was thinking of, sir.
Christianity, Islam, Judaism. The very middle is where they all overlap. There's one God who's the God of Abraham. Now, I would say, I don't think the God of Islam is Yahweh. I make a distinction. I think there's common history here in some of their documents, but what they say about God does not go along. For instance, the Trinity is definitely not a Islamic tenet, and so we would disagree on who that is. All three of these faiths claim some special relationship with God as God's chosen people, as those who believe in his Messiah, and as those who receive special revelation. The history of the Hebrews, the prophets, all three are divided into different subgroups or sects. We'll talk about that probably next week. I don't think we'll get there. Prayer, services in a holy building, and all of them see Jerusalem as a holy city. So you get that. It's where you see the other overlaps or the uniqueness of them that is different. For instance, Islam and Judaism both have dietary laws. They both practice fasting. For Islam, it's Ramadan. For the Jews, Yom Kippur. There's almsgiving or charity, and for both of them, they have a sacred language, Hebrew and Arabic. Christianity and Islam overlap with salvation and damnation. How's that? Hellfire and brimstone. It says recitation of a creed. Depends on which branch of Christianity you're in. We don't typically recite creeds. And Jesus's life shows up in these two, obviously not so much in there.
Jesus' life shows up in Islam?
Yes.
Oh.
Absolutely. I'll just jump to there. They believe Jesus was born of a virgin. There's an entire chapter in the Quran devoted to Mary and her special relationship to God, that he performed many miracles, healed the blind, raised the dead. It's okay for them to call Jesus the Messiah.
Interesting.
But he is not divine. The divinity of Jesus they would not ascribe to. He is at best a prophet or a servant. They look at the places where he's called the Son of God and say that word can also be translated servant, and so servant is the better translation, not son, for what it's worth. By the way, the word is paido, P-A-E-D-O, where we get pediatrics. So we know even that etymology, that's something we associate with children. So anyway, I take issue with that little thing, among other things. They believe that he was not. Here's a significant departure. They do not claim that he was crucified, that God saved him as the rebellion, as the people were as the people were rising up to crucify him in the confusion. God rescued Jesus. Some versions of Islam say actually his betrayer was the one crucified, that they thought they got Jesus. It was actually, in this case, Judas. And God moved him to another realm, a different dimension, which is not exactly the ascension per se. So they bypass kind of, for what us, the death and resurrection is central to our faith, and as well as the divinity of Jesus in that way. But yeah, Jesus is fine. They have no problems with Jesus in certain ways. And he was the last prophet before Muhammad. Muhammad, Jesus, and then they go back all the way to Adam and such. So it's interesting to look at this and to see this. If you're on the email list, you got this in a PowerPoint, so you can look at it. It's probably hard to see. I can see it okay, but I'm standing right next to it. You recognize this particular structure?
That's the temple, that's the,
This is Jerusalem.
yeah.
This is the Temple Mount. If you go to Jerusalem, this golden dome is not Notre Dame. That's in South Bend, Indiana, but nonetheless, it is very prominent. If you're standing on the Mount of Olives overlooking, which would be over here, overlooking the temple, you would prominently see the golden dome. For the record, this is where the Wailing Wall is, the western wall, if you're trying to put it together. And this is the walkway to get onto the Temple Mount. The agreement is that the Palestinians control the Temple Mount, and the Israelis control security and access to the Temple Mount. We know at times that doesn't work out really well because there have been plenty of things that have happened, but this is the Temple Mount. It is also the third holiest site in Islam. But the third holiest site in Islam is not that building. It's this building. The Al-Aqsa Mosque. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, that building. This is actually the holier building on the Temple Mount to the Islamic faith. It's the third holiest site in all of Islam, behind the two mosques, one in Mecca and one in Medina. The reason it's so holy is because of something that was believed to have happened that involved both of these things. This is the Dome of the Rock because there's a rock under there. And do you know what happened supposedly in the rock?
Is that the Jacob thing?
No.
Sacrifice.
Supposedly, from the Jewish perspective,
That what?
from what
What did she say?
where Isaac was sacrificed.
Oh.
From the Islamic perspective, sometimes you'll hear this is where Muhammad ascended into heaven, and we think, oh, he didn't die. No, he died and he's buried. You can visit his tomb in Medina. The ascension in mind is this moment in his life. I'll give you the two words, the Isra and the Miraj. Miraj might be an appropriate name for this vision that supposedly happened. He's in Mecca, and the angel Gabriel shows up with a winged horse of some sort. I don't know if I wrote down what the winged horse was called, and takes him on a night journey, which is what Isra means, to this mosque, which is called the Furthest Mosque. It's never named in the Quran, but to this mosque, where from this rock, he was taken into the heavens to converse with God, Jesus, and the prophets, is the belief. And so that's why this is a significant site for the Islamic faith. But this is actually the more holy of the two sites. Most people think this is the big dog. This is actually the big dog. This is the secondary.
What was the name of the other one again?
I'm going to get right because you asked me and I wrote it down. Al-Aqsa, A-Q-U-S, excuse me. Al-A-L-A-Q-S-A, no U.
A-Q?
Q-S-A, Al-Aqsa, the mosque. So it's a fascinating story. This little piece of land, and I say little, it's huge. How many of you have been? It's a huge piece. Did you both go up on the Temple Mount? Really remarkable. When you're walking, how big it is. You feel like the Western Wall is big until you get up here, and then you're like, whoa, this place is huge.
Or did you get to see the rock? Did they let you all in to see the rock?
Um,
Well, when I went 40-something years ago, we saw the rock.
I don't know if things have changed with
Right,
access.
a lot of things have.
I know certain of the mosques, you have to be Muslim to go in.
We were.
I didn't go in the
I was
mosque,
able to
but-
go right up to it.
We did.
We were able to walk.
We walked right up to we walked right up to it and around it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty big, but we couldn't really get very near to this one
No.
at all.
It's a rock, big rock.
It's a big rock. There you go.
Is it disappointing like Plymouth Rock? Cause that was a
It's
snooze.
bigger than Plymouth
Let me
Rock.
tell you.
Oh, yeah, much bigger.
Plymouth Rock was a snooze.
No, that.
It was like, this
was
is
the
it.
center of the temple, that was where the Holy of Holy was on the temple roof?
So the reason the western wall is so holy is they think this is the closest point to where the Holy of Holies
Okay,
was.
so that was,
Because remember, the temple faced east.
right,
So while the current
Okay.
orientation is this way,
gotcha.
the Mount of Olives on the east, this is the western wall. So the Holy of Holies would have been on the back side or the western side, inside the structure of the temple. So yeah, it's kind of disorienting because we think, well, why would it be there? Anyway, fascinating history and a symbol of the claim all three of these faiths make to Jerusalem. If you look back, I think Jerusalem shows up somewhere in all of them, and Jerusalem is the holy city for that. So if you've never been, you might not ever get to go, given what continues to happen over there. I don't think now's a good time to book a trip, given it, but hopefully, prayerfully, there will be an ease of tensions and maybe that will happen again. So let's get into kind of our walk through the 5 or 6 elements that are kind of your notes there. The first thing we talk about is ultimate concern, or put in a deistic way, God. What is God? We've already said that Islam is monotheistic, which is unique. It may have come out of a polytheistic background where Allah was one of many gods. We'll talk about that when we see the most holy site in Islam later. And with Muhammad's visit from Gabriel and all that he did, it elevated Allah as the only God, but that's debated. Most more strict Muslims would not like that telling of their history. They would maintain it differently, but one of their holiest sites seems to have pagan things that used to go on in there. So monotheistic as it is now, that Allah, as we said, is God. The word Allah is just Hebrew for God, Arabic for God. You can see even in some of the commonalities of Semitic languages, similar ideas, Yahweh, La, that phrase has a lot to do with God. And then when we're talking about Allah as the one true God, I feel like in this moment we have to add Mohammed or Muhammad. I don't know how you say it. I thought it was Mohammed, but I checked it 1,000 times. This guy, that's how you spell his name, who is the prophet of Allah. Though he's not considered divine, it's hard to have any of this without him. It's hard to separate the prophet from the faith. So I thought we'd spend just a few minutes in this regard talking about who he is. You may know some of these things, but it's kind of interesting to put this in perspective. Islam doesn't come into being until the 600s AD. So this is a post-Christian faith that arises. Muhammad was born in 570 in Mecca. That's why it's one of their hugely important cities. Some Muslims, not all, it's not like in the Quran, want to ascribe certain unique or miraculous qualities to his birth, probably because there was that Jesus story going around. And if we're going to have a prophet, we really need a good one. For instance, I don't know why this was important, but he is said to have been born clean and circumcised, his umbilical cord already cut. Upon falling to the ground, he grabbed a handful of earth and looked toward the heavens.
He is a miraculous baby.
If that happened, that would be something. But that might be a big if.
That might be.
but, you know, you see, it's just, anyway. Kind of how a lot of times we see these things grow up. He's orphaned very early in life. By the age of 7, both his mother and father have died. And his grandfather comes into the picture. He doesn't live much longer until an uncle is in charge of him. He begins to make kind of a forays on trading routes to provide that his grandfather initially introduced him to provide some sort of money, some sort of income for him. It wasn't until he was 40 years old in 610 AD that supposedly the angel Gabriel appears to him in a cave outside of Mecca. And it was this vision and a series of visions that he had, including what we talked about a minute ago, the night journey and the trip to heaven, where it was revealed to him the content of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. So he began, having got these visions, he'd go to Mecca and he began to share them. And a few people said, wow, that's kind of cool. We think we're going to follow you. But it didn't take long before he fell out of favor. And in 622, which is about 12 years later, after he maybe began to get some traction, he had to leave Mecca. He was exiled or ran for his life, either way you want to put it. And he goes to Medina, which is where he lives out most of the rest of his life, where he eventually dies. But he was very successful. If you're not familiar, I should have put a map on here. Mecca and Medina are in Saudi Arabia, kind of right along the Red Sea. Mecca's a little south. Medina's a little north of Mecca. They're not too awful far apart, as you would expect in the 600s. They're not, catching a plane to get there. It's a little bit of a journey. But in spite of being kicked out of Mecca, he proselytized a large amount by the time of his death, 10 years after he goes to Medina. A large amount of the Arabian Peninsula had heard of Islam, of Muhammad, of his visions, and began to subscribe to that. It helps probably that a lot of that is desert, so you don't have, people everywhere. He dies in 632. He's buried in Medina. He's buried in the second holiest site of Islam. It's called the Prophet's Mosque. Obviously, I didn't write down the Arabic word for it. And inside this second holiest site of Islam, the Prophet's Mosque there in Medina, you can still visit and see his burial area if you so choose. Actually, you couldn't. None of you could. Sorry. You can't go. But most of these mosques, particularly the most holy ones, are limited to only professing Muslims.
And just men, or can the women go in too?
That I don't know. It probably depends on a lot of things. I don't know. Probably depends on where the mosque is, who controls it. I'm guessing Mecca and Medina, it's probably pretty strict because Saudi Arabia is one of the most conservative branches of Islam. In Jerusalem, you may not have quite such that. I do know when we went up there at the gate, it was, I don't remember why, but I don't remember if they weren't in shorts. We were there in December, but they gave all of the women in our group something to wear, not a head covering, but a skirt or a long skirt. Not some of them even got a top, depending on what they had. I think they wanted you covered from ankles to wrist. And so you can visit the site, but even to walk on the property, they're there at the gate to say, man, you need to put this on.
And the man can't touch the woman because my husband almost got bayoneted because he put his arm around me.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Said, you don't touch a woman. Don't touch a woman.
Now, was that they didn't know how much that he was related to Ishmael, or is that there?
So yeah, obviously there are some commonalities in their holy book, the Quran, and they look at the ancestry, they trace their ancestry back. And yes, they trace Muhammad and others through Ishmael, not Isaac. In fact, they believe properly Ishmael was the one who Abraham was told to sacrifice, not Isaac. They think that when Hagar and Ishmael are kind of taken out to the desert, that where they end up is actually the city that would become Mecca. So yeah, there's much more of a tie to Ishmael than Isaac. We were just talking before with Joel, and he said they were watching a a documentary of something about the Ottoman Empire, and part of that they were telling Bible stories from the Muslim perspective. Well, you could probably tell it better than me. They weren't the same.
Yeah, they would be, it'd start out the same and then all of a sudden you'd be like, wait, what? I don't remember this doesn't seem right.
There you go. So
Ishmael was one of the dudes.
Ishmael's pretty important. So yes, good question, Mr. Brad. But Muhammad is key. He's the one that receives these revelations directly from God through the angel Gabriel, and they become the basis of the Islamic religion, which just brings us to their sacred writing, number one of which are these series of revelations that are known as their most holy book, the Quran or Quran, depending on how you want to read it. It is considered a well-preserved book because Muslims today believe the Quran is the earthly copy of the actual tablets that exist in heaven. That part of what Gabriel did was transcribe, and even on these visits, what do we call it, the Mirage visit to heaven, that he saw these tablets. It's kind of sound like Joseph Smith, right? Joseph Smith.
I literally was going to ask you, it's interesting that obviously the Islam religion exploded the way it did compared to Latter-day Saints, which certainly is not, I mean, it's got a few million people, I'm sure, maybe around the world, but comparatively speaking, it kind of has dropped off in growth, if you will, but obviously Islam has not.
Islam is, I want to say it may be considered the fastest growing faith right now in the world. 1.8, 1.9 billion adherents, just short of Christianity. But again, if you remember our week one, I said the statistics for Christianity are a little misleading because it includes sectarian groups that we might not say Christians, and it also includes people that say they're Christians. For instance, on surveys in our country, the US, you get 60 to 70% of people that claim some sort of Christian faith. But I would say I don't know if the number's quite that. But that's another story. Not that I'm going to judge it. So this book, the Quran, is thought to be an exact copy. It was dictated as it was to Muhammad. He recorded it. It contains 114 chapters called surahs and about 6,000 verses called ayats, if you're aware. I told you I was going to use a lot of it.
Now the Quran is kept in the building just outside that you mentioned.
I mean, you can buy Quran from Amazon.
No, I mean the original, the one.
No, the original's in heaven.
Right, I understand that. But
I don't know.
Copy, I guess they have
I don't know if there's like a master copy somewhere. I'd have to look that up. I don't know.
Okay.
But what they have is the Quran. They believe is the exact copy of what they were supposed to get. It took a while. It wasn't like one download. It was over a period of years that he received these revelations. And the Quran is not organized chronologically. It's actually organized sort of by longest to shortest. So the longer chapters are earlier, the shorter chapters are later. And as I said, one of those chapters or surahs is specifically devoted to Mary. And part of that would include the birth of Jesus. So the Quran is, for them, the most authoritative book. Maybe the follow-up question to that is what do they think about the Bible? They don't use the Bible per se. There are sections of the Quran, if I recall right. I didn't put this in my notes and look it up today. But if I recall from years ago, there are sections of the Quran that are basically lifted word for word from our Bible, our Old Testament. Here's the story of Joseph until you get to the twist. Here's the story of Isaac or Abraham until you get to the twist. Here's the story of whatever until there's this thing. So there's parts of it that you're like, oh, I've heard this before. So they wouldn't use the Bible. They wouldn't see the Bible as authoritative in any way. The Quran is for them. If there's anything in the Bible they need to know, it's in the Quran, and they can do without the rest. Certainly they would deny the validity of the New Testament accounts of Jesus. In fact, they say Most of what we believe about Jesus, his divinity, his death and resurrection was created several hundred years later by the group that became known as Christians. It wasn't originally there. And the best we have are some just scraps of evidence that testify to his existence outside, of course, of what they know in the Quran. So obviously you're seeing they're downplaying, certainly the New Testament, but editing, as it were, to their needs, the Old Testament. So this is the most authoritative book, the only one that's considered, as it were, we might say, the Word of God to them. But they have two other things that are important. One is called the Hadith, and that is a record of the traditions and stories about the life of Muhammad. So this is what God wants us to know. And since Muhammad, that's why I put Muhammad as one of the ultimate concerns. The next two of their kind of sacred writings, though they don't rise to the level of the Quran, are both about Muhammad. So he plays an outsized role in their faith. So I think we have to include him. This is a major source of their morality. We'll talk about when we get there. Sharia law, you've probably heard of that term bandied about. And it is second in authority only to the Quran. So this is what Muhammad did and all that sort of thing. It was mostly oral tradition. In many ways, we're a lot like Judaism, where we have the Hebrew Bible, and then we have the Talmud and the other parts that were passed down. And so this is kind of that next step, the Talmud, that becomes in Judaism written down, and by the 5th or 6th century, and in Islam, this doesn't get written down until the 8th or 9th century, where this is codified. And then they actually, as they go through it, I found this quite fascinating. They are ranked, the different parts of it, as authentic, acceptable, weak, or fabricated. So they admit parts of the legends around Muhammad might be fabricated, but it's still an authoritative book for them. There's some that are authentic, but there it is.
I mean, there's Christians who said that about Bible, so
Sure.
there is that.
There is definitely
There's that.
but they usually don't take it as authoritative when they get to that point.
Yeah.
That's the way we kind of, can just kind of disregard it. The third of this, I say sacred writings, this is actually, you could probably get this today because we're a written culture, but the Sunnah, or Sunnah, or however you would say it, is the customs and practices of the Prophet Muhammad. So it's how he lived his life as a guide for you to live the ultimate righteous Muslim life. So it talks about how he did his religious acts, how he ate. It's very important. You may have heard in Islam, you eat with your right hand. This comes out of this oral tradition. We don't need to go there. We don't need to talk about the left hand, but this comes out of this oral tradition. The Sunnah. Now, as I said, it was written down. I'm sure you can find this today, but until probably a very recent development, this was not something that was written. The Hadith was written. This was oral, passed down, and it, depending on where you come from and how far removed you are from, the 6th or 7th century, it's different. The Sunnah for this group might be different than this group because it's been passed down orally. It's like the game telephone you used to play. You start out with one word, and by the 10th person, you might have something totally different. And you tell a story, and then the next person repeats the story, and 3 or 4 stories later, there's a few details changed around. But these are what would be the most sacred writings, and in order. Quran certainly is the most important, the second most important. And this is where you're going to kind of get a more practical, the tradition, how to live your life. Thoughts, comments, questions before we move on? It's a ritual act, yes, ma'am.
I mean, I just think, I know we kind of roll our eyes a bit at this, but there's just hundreds of thousands of people who roll their eyes at what we believe. And so, it's.
If I'm coming across that way, I'm sorry.
No. I'm rolling my eyes at it myself, but it's like, but wait, there's tons of people who roll their eyes at what we say we believe. So,
That's very true. 1.9 million, 8 or 9 million, billion people, this, or some form of it. I assume you know this, but if I haven't indicated, much like Christianity, Islam is a spectrum of beliefs and practices. Maybe even somewhat like Judaism, a spectrum of beliefs and practices. But no matter where you are on the spectrum, there are these ritual acts. They're called the 5 pillars of Islam. So if you're a good Muslim, these are the 5 things you must do, no matter what brand or sect of Islam you are. The first one is called Shahada. This is the confession of faith or profession of faith. Does anybody know the profession of faith? I'm sure you've heard it. Very simple and straightforward. There's
something, there's only one Allah.
There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. So there's no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. To become a Muslim, you must confess this phrase, or whatever version of it. This is a translation of an Arabic phrase. Before a priest who must deem it truthful and passionate. And if you confess it 3 times truthfully and passionate in front of a priest or an imam, you're in. And then it becomes a part of your regular expression. Not to make the connection again, but in Jewish life, their prayer life is ritualistic. And so one of them would be the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And as part of their daily prayers, that's act number 2, we'll get to in a minute. This is going to be central to all the times that they pray. They will confess this, not just initially as their entry confession, but it will be a consistent confession in their life, which brings us to ritual acts number 2, Salah, which means prayer. They pray 5 times every day, and they pray, very important, facing Mecca. Much like the temple in Israel is oriented toward the east, toward the Mount of Olives, the prayer life of the Muslim is oriented toward Mecca. No matter where they are in the world, if you go to a mosque anywhere, there will be some sort of directional, it's actually probably set up and oriented that way, that when you go into prayer, you're going to be facing wherever you are in the world, Mecca. And you probably have heard this a time or two if you've ever traveled. It's about 3 minutes. You want to listen to the whole thing? It's the Muslim call to prayer. So 5 times a day, wherever you are, that has a Muslim city, over the loudspeakers, you will hear this prayer. We were in Jerusalem, and there's a Muslim quarter, obviously, in Jerusalem, and we're downtown center. We're actually, I don't know what they called it, but there's this place in Jerusalem that's kind of the hub from which all 4 quarters shoot out. And we're there, and there are speakers everywhere, and there we go. You hear this. For the record, what are they saying? You might have, because of the way they sing it, and because it's not our native language, you probably didn't notice, but all that I played was 2 words, probably 2 words you know, Allah Akbar. God is great, or Allah is the greatest. So the call to prayer is God is great 4 times. That's how it starts. There is no God but Allah 2 times. Muhammad is God, is Allah's prophet 2 times. Come to prayer 2 times. Come to salvation 2 times. God is great again 2 times. There is no God but Allah 1 time. And then that's your call to prayer. Yes.
Yeah, I was married to a guy from England, and he said that the hospitals now, the rooms have to face Mecca for the Muslims.
Like, is that a normal thing? Any hospital?
Yes, from what he said, it has to be that way now.
Interesting.
And I don't know.
I'm just thinking about like somebody, I don't know, you're a Muslim teacher. What's the time of days? Yeah, I mean, like you're a teacher in an elementary school here in America and you're Muslim.
So I
Is
know
there a
there's,
legal requirement that they're allowed to stop what they're doing to pray for however minutes?
I don't know. What's that?
Not just that, yeah, there's controversial business stuff.
Right, like you're a storefront owner, do you close your door for this many times a day? I was like, in Israel, did they close their storefront for this many minutes, or did you recall that?
I don't remember where we were
Okay.
at any particular, the only time we heard the call to prayer was in Jerusalem. And that was like only 2 days we were there. So I don't know.
Okay. Cause it's not just literally, I could stop and say, even if I was Catholic, the rosary or whatever, but they gotta get down on the floor and do the whole thing, right?
And the preference is you go to your mosque and it's a communal prayer.
Well, then there's no way people here in America, unless they're living right beside their mosque, are doing that.
No.
And there are some of the different branches or sects or whatever of Islam that say you only have to pray 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night.
Right,
So
and that
we
would
could
fit
fit
into
those
your
in.
breakfast, lunch,
You
and.
get up, you pray, right before bed you pray, and at your lunch break you can pray.
Right,
The other 2 are
right.
less required, but I would guess in a strict Muslim place, the world stops because it's time for prayer.
Interesting.
Along the line, what you're saying, I had to take a culture class, in my schooling, and the one of the things they're talking about, being culturally sensitive to our patients or whatever, but the one thing the example they were giving was actually turning the bed, turning the patient's, the family asked if they could turn the bed in the room to face, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, that's
So
a doable thing, but it's most of the time.
I was going to say, everything's
Most of
connected to
the
the
time.
wall, that's kind of hard, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So you've encountered that as a nurse. That's the thing. Interesting. And is there a significant, they just want to be able to pray from their bed, or is it?
probably sometimes they can't get out of bed, but that's why they're facing
Or I
that.
don't know if there's like, we heal faster if we face Meccas or some sort of,
I really honestly, that was.
I don't mean it
what we
facetiously,
were
I mean
given
it seriously.
in the discussion as to how to be sensitive to a
Okay.
Muslim. However, but that would make sense, and if they are bedridden, can't get up, then they're already facing, so.
So they can do that. I think a commonality between this, is that a hand?
Yeah, so is prayer, in your perception of this religion, is prayer totally ritualistic, or do they have intercessory or other personal forms of?
I have more homework apparently. My impression is there is certainly a ritualistic, there are certain prayers that are prayed at certain times of day. How much beyond that? Yeah, because the word means to be a Muslim is to submit to Allah. So prayer is, I don't know if it's about trying to think that Allah is benevolent towards you and you make requests of him like we would think of in a Christian perspective of how we relate to God as Father, but more that you want to submit to Allah. And one of the ways you do that is 5 times a day, you drop everything to show him your devotion, even if it's recitation.
Well, knowing the Quran, I was wondering if there were other models of prayer, or Muhammad gave a prayer to the populace like Jesus taught the disciples.
I want to look that up because I don't know. That's a
I do
good
know
question.
A lot of them carry their prayer rug with them. Wherever they go.
Right, that's true.
Well,
I don't know if it's
drop on the
significant to have that
I know on the
rug, or
TV,
just really more of a,
the prayer.
you gotta feel so better have something to do. I don't know when I don't know if it's a
I really don't, yeah, no, I don't know either, but you're right, that seems to be.
Do they have a
A lot of people that walk with.
dedicated day of worship like the Jews have Sabbath, we have Sunday, first day of the week? Do they have
I believe they do, but I didn't get that far yet because I knew I wasn't going to get that far tonight, so I stopped short.
Okay.
Maybe we could go back. Let's go back to our chart and see if it says a whole. I think
Right.
if it says whole. Holy City.
Here it's not good.
Friday prayer is, I guess Friday is important.
Friday, okay.
It is kind of an interesting one.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Sabbath for Jews.
Sabbath.
But when we get to kind of social organization and that sort of thing, we'll
Okay.
probably talk about that. Moral code. I don't even know what we're doing. Where are we? We did that. We did that. We did this. Any more questions about prayer? Next, Black Hawk.
Shocking.
This is almsgiving, charity. Much like we would think Christian tithing, it's expected for the Muslim that they would give a certain amount of their money to those who are needy. Some do it like philanthropically to hospitals or other type educational facilities. Some do it too. There's plenty. If you've been to any Middle Eastern countries, certainly you have the extremely wealthy and you have the extremely poor. And so almsgiving is a way that the wealthy are supposed to show their devotion.
Bonus points.
Except
Bonus points.
bonus points, yeah. Or is that big portion of wealth? I don't have much to say about that. They give money. I don't know how you say this word, Swami? I don't know. This is fasting. Of course, you're probably familiar with Ramadan. This is a very unique fast. I think you don't eat. Ramadan fasting is when the sun comes up till the sun goes down, you don't eat. After the sun's down, eat whatever you want as much as you want.
And have a party.
They have massive feasts.
I had a couple of teachers in India that were Muslim, and Ramadan was a big thing, but they always had like a big feast.
And there's obviously, like with any sort of fasting, there is you give up something to replace with your devotion, in their case to Allah. A lot of times Ramadan is a flashpoint in the Middle East, in Jerusalem. I can't think of how many times at the Temple Mount that seems to be around Ramadan because pilgrims come.
Because they're hangry.
Well,
Yes.
there you go. I thought it was something theological. Makes perfect sense.
It actually sounds, I'm sorry. It's a real thing.
Yeah, but you can see how a bunch of Muslims coming to what the Jewish people think is their holiest site and having a party really ticks them off. Yeah, so around Ramadan, you're going to see in the news clashes between Palestinians and Jews. Even Muslims that have made the trek. Although I don't know how easy it is from certain Muslim countries to get into Israel. It's not like you can just hop across the border, even though it's right next door, because of the tensions in the area.
When we were there, which is 40-something years ago, we were in Jordan, which is a Muslim country. And when we went across the river to Israel, we were not allowed to have the Israelis stamp our passports. They put a slip of paper in our passport, but it didn't stamp the page. And then when we stopped, when we had to cross that bridge, and then when we went back, they stopped us and they took that piece of paper out of our passport so that we could get back into Jordan. They wouldn't have let us in back in Jordan if Israel had stamped it.
Yeah, I remember a piece of paper we had on our trip, and I was definitely worried I was going to lose it and not be able to leave or something.
It's dangerous.
It's scary.
And that's not just to go to Jordan, it's to go
Well,
on.
it was any other country, but we were in Jordan and in Egypt. But
So Ramadan is a holy month of fasting, and that's really what this is about primarily, not so much regular fasting as
Right.
this ritual around Ramadan. Last of the 5 is the Hajj. This is the pilgrimage to Mecca that every good Muslim is expected to make at least once in their life. The reason you go to Mecca is because you want to visit the Kaaba. What is the Kaaba, you ask? It's that box.
Oh, wow.
This is the mosque that's in Mecca. It's where I got to read. It's the Al-Masjid Al-Haram Mosque. This massive place. I believe I read 300,000 to 400,000 people can fit in this. If you noticed, the Hajj this year wasn't so long ago, and there were problems because of the heat. People were dying because it was so hot. But this is
Those are all
so.
seats.
Oh, there are no seats.
The red around the.
That's people.
Just standing next to each other.
Wow.
This is people.
So they circle.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean,
And dressed in what they dressed in and the heat.
you've
Oh,
got
yeah.
just this mass of people.
And so what is in this Kaaba?
Well, this Kaaba box,
Kaaba,
is, you see, is the cubic shape. It is the most holy site in all of Islam. That's why you want to get, really the pilgrimage is as much to that. And when you face Mecca, you're facing that is the truth. When you're there, you walk around it 7 times in a counterclockwise direction, if you're curious. But to answer Joyce's question, what is it? It is thought to be the oldest mosque on earth. This is the place that they think there are evidence inside. You can go inside. There is an inside. That there were pagan idols in there that once lined the wall. You can see it's a pretty decent size, the number of people. It's not massive. It's not like the Dome of the Rock, but it's a pretty good sized thing. The oldest mosque that Muhammad himself, the key is on this corner, and I know you can't see it, is a black stone that's thought to be something special. I've read 1,000 different tales about it. It's a meteorite. It's a stone God sent directly from, you can't see it on this.
I got you, but I can.
You can look up the black stone at the Kaaba and you'll see this silver dish and inside, and now it's a broken stone. The highlight of a Hajj is if you can get close enough to touch or kiss that black stone, not the Blarney stone, and I don't know if they sanitize it between kisses or not. So, it's kind of a thing. But this is the place that it was thought, the city of Mecca, where Hagar, that Adam and Ishmael began the construction of this building. I say Adam?
Yes.
Abraham and Ishmael built this, started the construction of this. It's the oldest temple to God that now is the oldest mosque. And Muhammad himself was thought to put this black precious stone and embed it in the southeast corner of this building. It's fallen off. It's been damaged over the years. It's actually in pieces now, held together, glued together. And he put it there in the year 605, supposedly. And so there you go. That's the holiest site in Islam that they built this massive mosque around. That at least once in your lifetime, you make your Hajj to go there. The thing that I don't quite understand is why everybody wants to go at once. Like when I go on vacation, I go, when is everybody going there? We'll go either before or after they're there. And so it won't be as crowded.
It would seem more physically beneficial to not be early. So that you're not stuck inside.
But that's the goal, is to be right up next to that.
Yeah, I've read it. It's supposedly a meteor.
Supposedly a meteorite.
Like you mentioned. And
There's several different stories around what it is or might be,
meteorite stuck out.
but it's vitally important
Oh, absolutely.
to the Islamic faith. And this ritual in your lifetime, there's another word, and I didn't write it down. So Hajj is when you go once in your life, when everybody goes. But there's another word that you can go there when it's not that time of year, and I forget the word. And some people go more than once, of course. If you can afford it, you go every time the party is on. But if 1.8 billion people showed up, they need a few more seats. Are you finding something, Joel? You look like you're researching over there.
Yeah, I am, but I can't really. It's so there's so much I don't understand to be able to. All the pieces that sound like you're talking about. It's just they go a particular time of the year, certain after. It sounds like the Passover. They got this day on, it has to go between this day and this day. These are the holiest days, and I don't know why that. Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
but that's why it's in June. That's why it's so hot.
Right.
This germaphobe in me is like looking at that going, ooh.
You think they didn't do it during like 2020?
Well, I was gonna ask, did they have?
They
COVID
discourage,
restrictions?
but people still.
Ah, Because where is Mecca?
It's in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, is it
It's
Saudi
Red
Arabia?
Sea. It's
Okay,
not on the Red Sea. It's kind of just off the Red Sea. Around a little lower than halfway down the Red Sea, if I remember right. I'll write down, put a map up for next time.
I like maps. But you'll make me happy anyway, nobody with this.
Maybe I'll find a picture. I mean, yeah. It's just remarkable to look at that picture and think about all the people. And what,
So what's the start date that they started worshiping at this site? Do you remember? It's probably thousands.
in the 600s was when Muhammad started the faith.
So
And
it's
when he supposedly put the stone in,
So 1500.
so, you know, how early that started, he wasn't there at his death, he'd been exiled.
Right.
So how long after his death did this place gain significance?
So
I don't know.
800 years after Christ. But my question is with the volume of people that worship as Muslims, you say almost 2 billion people, 1.8 going to this site over a period of 1,500 years, let's say 1,200, that they got 100 years established. Right. If you can understand what I'm trying to.
Yeah, I get you.
So, oh my goodness, that's just such a load.
what did you get? Let's go find it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I'm thinking, Joyce, a lot of things.
Say,
A lot of things, Joyce. A lot of things I'm thinking.
Is there anything similar to place or observance for Christians like this? I can't think of it.
like
For Catholics would be Rome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that would be for Catholics, it would be go to Rome.
Go to
You know,
Rome for
you have to go to
Easter.
Rome.
yeah, but there's no set time when that, you know.
No. I mean, Easter's probably the most crowded there,
Yeah.
I think, in Rome at the Vatican City. But yes, you're right. It's
there are Christian pilgrims across Spain, so that's different places
Yeah.
to go from different places following. So
The whole tourism industry for Israel, for Journeys of Paul, for the Red Sea and.
some of them call the apostles, supposed apostle trails,
Right.
like across Spain.
Now, what's the holiest site for Jews? It's in the same,
The holiest site today would be the Western
the
Wall.
Western Wall, which is, that's what I thought was.
Yeah, that's as close as you can get to where they believe the glory of God once dwelt. We were there, we flew over with a guy taking his child to bar mitzvah. We saw people coming to Jerusalem and doing their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah at that place. That's considered for a Jew, the top of the food chain to do.
Western Wall, that's what I'm saying.
But, well, you don't see this at the Western Wall. This, you see crowds, it's a tourist attraction.
Right.
But you don't see this.
No.
Yeah, I think y'all blow that up because you can't really tell, I mean, the mass of people moving is just.
Well, they're going counterclockwise.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
So they're moving constantly there?
Yeah, they're all going around.
Yeah.
oh my.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Well,
Like a spiral.
Yeah. I don't know how they get in that.
you know, it's June in the Middle East and a woman is covered from head to toe and all so you know she's hot. Jeez.
And she has to pee and all the things.
All the things. There's a lot of things we have to be concerned with. Lots of things.
I'm sorry. I'll have to delete the last 5 minutes of our discussion. Anyway,
My sister appreciates my voice on there.
sometimes she said that. All right, well, I'm gonna
Hi,
call.
Heather.
She's in Glacier National Forest right now, or National
Aw.
Park, so she's having a good time.
She listens to it sometimes later.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna do moral code, we're gonna do Sharia law next time, and the other, I think, 3 other things. Moral code, social organization, what was the other one? That's it. We'll talk about Sunnis and Shias and the different sects under worldview, and then we'll go from there, okay? All right,
That's just blowing my mind.
yeah, that's why I picked that, and there are a lot, I could get personal pictures of that.
I mean, I've
But
known
that
about it
for me is just-
all my life, but I just, I mean, I've never seen this. I mean, it's literally blowing me away.
And for these people, this is the best moment of their life. For some of them, they go there once in their lifetime. This is the goal.
Yeah.
Of
Still,
their,
you gotta put it in motion, because that's just,
yeah, I'll try to get a video next.
That would be interesting, yeah.
it's just amazing. The movie. Because it looks like a football stadium.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the amount of public.
So there we go. All right, let's pray. And then we'll go. Father, we thank you for your love and grace for us. We thank you that out of your love, you sent Jesus. And Lord, we know that we are so, I don't know what the word is, fortunate, blessed, that somehow we have come to know you and come to know the hope that we have in you and come to know the forgiveness and salvation that's there. We live in a world full of so many faiths that follow and practice things that, while maybe devout, ultimately are empty. But we thank you that we have hope in you and because of what you have done for us. Father, as we go through these next weeks and learn about these faiths, give us great compassion for these folks that we learn about. Lord, help us to go from maybe what are characterizations in our mind or caricatures in our mind of what it means to be a Muslim or a Hindu to a recognition that these are individuals who you love and who Christ died for and who we might have the opportunity one day to share our hope with. Lord, thank you for that. Thank you for the time together, for the fellowship we have, the privilege of learning. And may you bless this time in our lives, we pray in Jesus' name.